All right, guys, back at Hustler Casino Live. Today we are playing 5100. I sit down with $50,000, and in the first interesting hand, there's a raise to 300 from Zio. I make it 1,000 on the button with King Queen offsuit. I think calling here would be okay, but with this exact hand, I think I prefer a raise, so that's what I do. Mike X now cold calls in the small blind, and Zio lets go of Ace Jack. So we go heads up to the flop against Mike, on which we hit top pair. It's Queen 7 deuce, all spades. We don't have a flush draw, just the top pair. After he checks, I think you could go either way, but sometimes checking top pair for balance and disguise seems like a decent idea. So that's what I do this time, although I probably wouldn't do this every single time. Off to a turn card, which is another 7. Now, to me, that looks fairly innocent in the moment, but as you guys can see, Mike has turned trips, so we get a bit unlucky here. He leads out for a little less than half pot, $1,100. After having checked back the flop, this is a fairly easy call, so that's what I do. And we see the Jack of Diamonds on the river, so shouldn't really change anything aside from now we are losing to Queen Jack. Mike now bets $3,300. Less than pot, but I don't know. I don't love this spot. We're losing to a lot of hands, like, of course, any 7, full house, a flopped flush, maybe a hand like ace queen once in a while. But we're also beating some value bluffs, like, say, Queen 10 suited. He could have, let's say, ace jack with the ace of spades. A few value bets that we're beating, and of course, all the bluffs that he could have in this instance, like any naked ace of spades holding, or whatever. Maybe something like 8-9 suited that just decides to bluff after I check back the flop. So it's a close spot. In the end, I decide to call. That's usually the case when I'm up against Mike or guys like that who are just trying to gamble, have some fun. I don't want to play too tight against most of the players here at Hustler Casino Live. Mike X, good friend of mine, he's definitely in that category. So I toss in the call, and that means we're going to give Mike an additional $3,300 here. Nice hand to him. In the next one, similar developments as Zio raises to 300 again. I've got Queen Jack offsuit on the button, almost exactly like the last hand, actually. I re-raised to 1,000. This is probably just a little bit too wide. King Queen offsuit, I think, is all right, but Queen Jack, I don't know. But I get the feeling that Zio is playing fairly snug, so I go for it. Mike X cold calls in the small blind. Zio this time calls as well. So 3 of us to a flop, which comes down Queen 4 deuce. Rainbow. Looks pretty good to me. Top pair. We should only be losing to flop sets or a hand like ace queen, king queen. But other than that, I'm not too worried about it. Action text to me, I bet $1,100. Mike X calls and Zio folds. Now, I am taking note of the fact that Mike X called the flop with Zio left to act behind him. That's a little bit stronger than if Zio were to act first, he folds, and then Mike X calls, closing the action. So I'm bearing that in mind as we go to a king of spades on the turn. Weird card here because I feel like it's much better for me in general, but I don't really want to bet it because now I've got second pair, decent kicker, enough showdown value. So I wasn't super sure what the best line was here, to be honest. I decided to bet, which is usually the case when I'm unsure about a spot, whether it's a certain check or a certain bet. I err on the side of putting chips in the pot, so I bet around a third, $1,700. Mike X makes the call once again, and now I'm thinking we might be in some trouble. I don't see him having a king too often, but if he's got a queen, well, we just kind of have to hope he's got a worse queen than us, which of course is possible, but since he cold called pre-flop, ace queen is definitely in there. So I'm treading with caution as we go to the river, which is the 6 of spades. At this point, I think we're just out of value if there is any to be had. So when he checks, I check it back, and sure enough, we're going to lose this one as well to Mr. X. Next, this hand goes down where I am in the straddle, so we are playing 5,100, 200 here. Gets around to Zio, who opens it up from the small blind to 700. Now, Zio is perfectly aware of the fact that he should probably have a strong hand to do this with because he's got to get through Henry and myself. Not the easiest 2 players to try to steal the blinds from, so I'm bearing that in mind, but regardless, I have pocket queens, so of course I am going to go for a raise here in position with the straddle on. Nice spot. I make it 2,400. He makes the call after a bit of thought, and we go to a flop of ace, ace, 9 with 2 hearts. Looks pretty good to me, even though of course we are losing to an ace or pocket 9s. It's just fairly unlikely. I mean, if he's got ace king, he probably would have re-raised pre-flop. Ace jack and ace 10 suited, I guess, are possible. Ace queen, super unlikely since I've got 2 queens. So even though it looks a little sketchy, I'm not too worried about it. This is a board I should be betting small with all my hands on, I think. So I put in 1,600 after he checks. Zio makes the call, and we go to a turn card, which is the 4 of spades. He checks it again, and now I think checking back makes more sense than betting, although betting, I guess I could see an argument for it. This time I just check it back though, and we go to a river, which is the 7 of spades. Zio now leads out for $6,400, which is around 75% of the pot or so. Tough spot now with queens. They're just a bluff catcher. It's tough for him to have an ace, but I think it's also tough for him to bluff. There are plenty of hands he might have though, like let's say any missed heart draw. Perhaps he's turning a hand like 8-7 suited into a bluff that floats on the flop, but it's just so difficult to have a lot of bluffs in his spot. So I think a fold here is probably okay. Call also seems okay. It's a pretty neutral spot. So in the end, I end up making the call, which I kind of kicked myself about later on because he turned over ace queen, and I feel like I maybe should have got away from that one. Sometimes I get a little stubborn when it's really hard for my opponent to have a strong hand, but then they show me a strong hand and I'm like, dude, come on, you know it happens from time to time. I mean, you're on the other end of that often enough. But anyway, we move right along. We're stuck a little bit in the session, trying to get things going back in the opposite direction. Next, it's time for me to look down at ace queen. This time there's a bit of action ahead though. There's a raise from Greg to 600. I think the $200 straddle was on this hand. Ling Ling then re-raises to 2,000, which is a pretty small size from the small blind. I look down at ace queen, like I said, we're in position, we're up against Ling Ling with a super strong hand. I think it's a straightforward raise spot, so I make it 4,800 to go. She makes the call after Greg folds, so we're gonna be playing a big one, in position at least. Unfortunately, the flop doesn't bring any help. It's 9-4-5 rainbow. Pretty innocuous board though. I think one that we can easily bet many hands on for around half pot or 40%. So that's what I do. She checks, I put in 4,000. She makes the call with her pocket sevens, which I guess is normal, and we see the 9 of clubs on the turn. She checks it again, and I think continuing to bluff with this hand makes perfect sense. Even on this turn card, it's just unlikely she will ever have a 9 unless it's exactly pocket 9s. But that said, I've played a fair amount with Ling Ling, and she's very sticky. Whenever she has even a resemblance of a hand, she does not like to fold. Rather, she hates being bluffed, from what I can gather, especially by me. So I decided to just check this one back. We might even have the best hand once in a while, although I'm not banking on it. River card is another 9, so I guess, you know, if we checked back an overpair, now is the time to go for a bluff, but we won't get the chance because Ling Ling leads out herself for $11,000. She's got a full house. I guess it makes sense, maybe looking to get called by ace high, but I just let this one go considering we could have many better hands to call with. And yeah, turns out this time it was the right decision as she had a full house. Nice hand, Ling Ling. This one goes to her. Can't say we're getting super lucky tonight. Feels like we're perhaps running a bit bad, but even when that's the case, the name of the game is trying to not lose too many chips, right? However, it is tough to lose chips with pocket aces. That's what I've got here. It's the perfect remedy to how this session has been going. Henry opens it up to 600. I re-raise to 2,000 on the button. One thing to note here is we're playing the stand-up game, and I am one of 2 remaining players who needs a button. It's between myself and Greg. So the great thing about this is that I'm going to get no credit here with this re-raise, especially on the button. Pretty sweet time to get aces. And I think Henry understands that because when it gets back around to him with his ace queen, he does not call or fold. Instead, he puts in another raise. He makes it $8,600. Music to my ears, of course, as I've got position and the best possible starting hand. But I decided to do something a bit unorthodox, if you will, and just call. I think that makes perfect sense in this situation though. Like I said, I'm not going to get a lot of credit, so Henry could be out of line with this 4-bet. And considering SPR, which is just a nerdy term for how many chips are left remaining compared to the size of the pot, I think a call here is fine because we could easily get all in by the river, if not sooner. So I flat with aces, set the trap, and we go to a flop of queen, jack, deuce. My man has got top pair, top kicker, but it is the worst top pair, top kicker he could ask for because we are laying in the weeds with the number 1 hand. Henry continues for a bet of 5,400. I see no reason to raise this. I think he's probably got a decent hand, but even if he's bluffing, we of course want to keep that door open. So I make the call, and then disaster strikes on the turn, guys. It's another queen. I I guess it's just not my night here. Henry continues betting. He puts in $8,200, which is pretty small compared to the size of the pot. It's like around 25% or something. But already I am not loving this situation. We are losing to any queen. We are losing to pocket jacks. And if he had a hand like pocket kings, I think he might have checked it actually on this turn card. Maybe not always, but often enough. So really, we're only beating bluffs, and it's just so tough for him to have bluffs now since I have the two aces. I even have the ace of clubs, so he can't have the nut flush draw. Just a gross spot already, but I make the call. Of course, we could always improve to an ace, I guess, or a queen if he has pocket jacks. But the river is a king, which I guess is really the nail in the coffin, because one of the few hands he might play this way that we were still ahead of is pocket kings, and that of course now beats us as well. So Henry shoves all in, 24,000, which is around half pot, maybe a hair more. And I think now we've got a pretty easy fold. I know it seems weird, but we've actually got one of the worst hands I would ever have in this spot. We could have pocket jacks, we could have queen jack suited, we could have ace queen, king queen, pocket kings maybe. All sorts of stuff. Aces is just way too weak now. It actually takes me a while to let it go. I think that was just an emotional trauma moment I was having because I had this beautiful plan pre-flop and it all just went to shit. But that's how it goes. You have to play the hands you're dealt. You have to play every street as it comes. So no time for sulking, or rather not too much time. I eventually do let it go. And I'm happy to see later on that he did have ace queen at least, so we don't get bluffed. A few rounds later, this one comes up where Ling Lin opens to 300. She's been playing a bunch of hands. I decide to get frisky with 7-4 suited on the button. I raise it up to 1,000. Definitely not strong enough to call. Probably folding this one like, I don't know, 90% of the time. But welcome to the 10%, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. She makes the call. We go to a flop of Jack 8-6 with one spade. So we've got a straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. It's a pretty wet board, so I think the times we do bet, it's going to be for a bigger sizing. That's what I do here. 2/3 around, how much did I bet? 1,400. Ling Lin makes the call, which I think is indicative of at least a pair, if not top pair. So I'm planning to continue applying pressure if we get a good turn card, and that's exactly what we get. It's the 3 of spades, giving me a pretty disguised flush draw, I think. Ling Lin checks again, and now I am just going to keep betting as if I had something strong. Guys, it's really not that complicated. If I had an overpair, 2-pair, a set, all sorts of stuff possible, I would definitely continue betting. So of course, with hands like these, the same applies. I put in 4,400, and I really don't envy her now. She's just got a top pair with a bad kicker. She knows that she loses to a bunch of hands, but she also knows that I might be bluffing with something exactly like this. So she makes the call one more time, looking for some help on the river. Can our luck finally turn tonight? Nope, it's the 6 of clubs pairing the bottom card. It's pretty much just a brick. Now, she checks again, and once again, we've got a decision. Do we bluff, or do we just give up? Well, I think since we don't have removal to hands like 10-9 suited, or 9-7, well, I guess we do have some removal to 9-7, but she could have some missed straight draws. She could have a hand like 8x of spades. She could have a few hands that are going to be pretty easy to fold, I guess, on this river. And of course, a hand like the one she's got, Jack with no kicker, is going to be really tough to hang on with. So considering I have plenty of value bets available, I decide to unload the clip with 7 high here. I put in 14,000, targeting a pot-sized bet, which we pretty much get right on the dot, off by 150 bucks. Anyway, I bet pot, and now she thinks about it for quite some time. It does suck for her to have the 10 of spades because she has removal to straight draws and flush draws, which are hands, of course, that she would want me to have. So I think with this exact holding, she should probably fold, I guess. But then again, top pair is top pair. You guys know how it is. It sucks to fold that. And like I said earlier, she hates getting bluffed. I think she'd rather make questionable calls and lose than make what some might consider an appropriate fold and then get bluffed in the process. So eventually, after a minute or two, she does make the call. Nice call, Ling Ling. You're going to win this hand. I've got 7 high, and this $41,000 pot is not going our way. Can't say we didn't try, though. About an hour later, this one comes up where Zio raises to 500. Seems like the 200 is once again on. Ling Ling calls on the button, and I look down at ace queen in the big blind. Gonna be the best hand more often than not, and it's a pretty strong hand as it is. So I re-raise to $3,000. Mike X once again in there with the cold call versus me. He defends his straddle, he's got position. Zio lets it go, but Ling Ling calls again on the button. So three of us going to a flop. Interesting developments pre-flop, I should say. But anyway, standard hustler hand here. We go to a flop of 8-8-4 with two spades. I don't have a spade, I don't have a pair. I kind of have nothing going on, so I decide to check it. Mike X also checks, and now Ling Ling checks as well. So feeling pretty good when we see the queen of spades come on the turn. That gives us top pair, top kicker. Sure, there's a flush out there, but it's just unlikely anyone's got one, especially after they both check the flop after the pre-flop raiser checks, which of course this time was me. So I don't think anyone has a flush draw, at least not too often. I check again though, because I think there's probably more value in either letting them bluff, sensing some weakness from me, or value betting a weaker hand, like for example pocket nines. Mike X takes a stab at it. He puts in $4,000. Ling Ling makes the call. She's got the jack of spades, so she's in there. And now I've got ace queen. I think the standard play here is to check raise. The trap has been set. Time to pounce on this. Ling Ling probably has a draw or a weaker pair than mine. Mike X could have any holding that is not as strong as ace queen. So unless we're up against a, trapped full house or quads on the flop, I'm not too worried about it. Like I said, flush seems unlikely. As you guys can see, that is a complete disaster because Mike X happens to have the nut flush draw that checked the flop and then gets there on the turn as I make top pair, top kicker. A pretty unfortunate turn card for me. He goes with it. He's got 14,000 in his stack. Ling Ling folds. Of course, I'm not too happy to see that he's got a flush, but we do have some outs. I ask him how many times he wants to run it. He says, how many times do you want to run it, bro? We do this little dance that happens every time, and I say, the hell with it. Let's just go one time. We don't get there. It's the deuce of clubs. Mike X scoops this $42,000 pot, and the misfortune continues tonight. But again, like I said earlier, we should try to lose as few chips as possible when we're running like this. Getting all in versus the nut flush is not gonna cut it. It's not the best way to do that. But we have one more hand here tonight, and maybe, just maybe, this one goes our way. It is gonna be the biggest pot of the night. So in this one, there's a raise from Brittany to 500. Ling Ling makes the call, and then Henry re-raises from the small blind to 2,600. I'm in the big blind with pocket deuces. Now let me be the first to say, against a raise, a call, and a re-raise, as frustrating as it feels, we gotta let these small pocket pairs go. Deuces through probably eights, just gotta get out of there more often than not. Maybe eights can call, it depends, but I'm just not really in the mood at this point, and I don't think it's actually that bad to call since we do have position against Henry, who is one of the deeper stacks at the table, if not the second deepest stack. So plenty of money to win if we hit a set against him. If we get re-raised from someone behind, then I guess that'll just be a justified punishment, but that doesn't end up happening. I cold call with the deuces. Mike X also calls with sixes in the straddle. Brittany and Ling Ling come along as well. So 5 of us go into a flop, which is beautiful. Jack, 6, deuce. Bottom set on a flush draw board, 5 ways. This is good stuff, guys. Well, of course it's actually not, because as you can see, it is a set over set situation. Kind of goes in theme with the rest of the night. Henry checks. I decide to get cute and check it as well. It's just so unlikely that this will check around that I'd rather see what happens behind me and then make a decision. Mike X bets 5,500. Brittany calls right away. And of course, with a set, a check raise here is almost always the best play, but I decide to get cute again and just call, mostly because I was expecting one of them to bet the turn. And given stack sizes, I thought that would set up an all-in quite nicely. So this is mostly a stack size dependent decision, but I should mention that a check raise here is more than okay, if not preferred. Anyway, I just call and we see a beautiful turn card. It's the 9 of clubs, which should change absolutely nothing aside from maybe giving these guys some more outs if they've got a flush draw or maybe now a straight draw. I check again. Mike does not slow down. He bets, guess what? All his chips, 30,700, which is a pot-sized bet. I love to see it, but to be honest, I kind of thought we might be up against sixes. I don't know if you could hear the audio during the stream. I actually turned around, faced Henry, and said, I think I might be dead here. Of course, he's not in the hand, so that's not like an angle or anything for all you people that are going to freak out in the comments below. Anyway, Brittany calls Mike's all in, and I can't blame her. She's got a straight draw and a flush draw now. But of course, it's time to spring the trap and jam all in because Brittany is not all in. She's got 35K remaining, so I'd rather get all that in there right now with what I think is the best hand, at least against her. Mike, I'm not too sure about. I think he could have a jack, like maybe ace jack, but I think he could easily have sixes as well. So Brittany calls the all in. We have a three-way all in here with one card to come. It's kind of weird because there's like a side pot between me and Brittany that's worth 70K, but the main pot is worth, I don't know, like 120. It's weird. These things get confusing. That's why we have such good dealers here at HCL. Magic knows what's going on, so even if I don't, we are in good hands. We decided to run it twice. Mike lets me know the bad news that he's got pocket sixes. My worst fears are confirmed. We are essentially drawing dead. Only a deuce would give me the best hand. And even though I am the biggest luck box in the world, I don't know if I can pull out a one-outer. That's tough even for me. So all I'm looking to do here is hold against Brittany. And luckily, we do. First river is a 3 of diamonds. Second one is the ace of spades. So we end up winning the side versus her, but losing the main. I think when it was all said and done, I either won or lost a few $1,000s, which I think is very fortunate on its own. Getting set over set and not losing a bunch of money, in fact, probably winning a few thousand is amazing, right? So no complaints at all. I played this hand poorly pre-flop, and this is the kind of stuff that can happen. But anyway, that was the last interesting hand for me. Not my best night ever, not the best distribution of cards, but of course, that's how it goes sometimes. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hands.